Ryan Gosling, most people will know him as the guy from The Notebook, or the silent guy with the scorpion jacket in Drive, or Ken, or as of this year, the junior high science teacher who wakes up alone in space and has to save the solar system. And if those 4 sentences don't immediately make sense as one person's career, good. That's exactly the point. Because what's so interesting about Ryan Gosling is that he is one of the few actors in Hollywood who has never once done the obvious thing. Not by accident, not out of desperation, on purpose, every single time. He finds his lane, masters it completely, and then walks away from it just to see what's on the other side. Which is frankly a little annoying when you're trying to explain him to someone. So today I want to shine some light on the career of Ryan Gosling, to show why he might just be the most quietly ambitious actor of his generation. Ryan Gosling was born in London, Ontario, Canada in 1980. Now, London, Ontario is not London, England. It is a mid-sized Canadian city that is most famous for being close to other places. Not exactly the obvious origin story for a Hollywood icon. His parents were working class. His dad worked at a paper mill. His mom was a secretary. Growing up, Gosling was the kind of kid who was always performing, always doing impressions, always making people laugh. At 11, he auditioned for the Mickey Mouse Club, and he got in. Now, if you know anything about the Mickey Mouse Club class of 1993, you know that Gosling was sitting in rehearsals next to Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, and Christina Aguilera, which, in hindsight, is a bit like being in a garage band with 3 people who are all about to become the Beatles. After the Mickey Mouse Club, he did a Canadian teen show called Breaker High that nobody watched, and then played the young version of Hercules in a TV series. As career launchpads go, it is a very specific one. But here's the thing. While the world was busy deciding that Ryan Gosling was about to become a romantic lead, which after The Notebook in 2004 was a completely reasonable thing to decide, Gosling was already doing something else entirely. He was paid $3,200 for it. Half Nelson is a 2006 independent film about a history teacher at a Brooklyn middle school who has a crack addiction and an unlikely friendship with one of his students. The whole movie cost $700,000. It was shot in 23 days. Gosling was 25 years old, and that year he got nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor. The field that year was Forest Whitaker, Will Smith, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Peter O'Toole. Gosling was 25, he was paid $3,200, and he was competing in one of the deepest Best Actor races of the decade. Forest Whitaker won, and fairly so. But the fact that Gosling was even in that conversation, for a film that almost nobody saw, tells you everything about what was really going on with this guy. What he does in Half Nelson is genuinely difficult to describe because the performance works precisely because it doesn't announce itself. He plays Dan Dunn, a man who is extraordinary at his job and completely falling apart at the same time. Not a tortured genius, not a tragic figure, just a person who contains both things at once and can't make them stop being true simultaneously. Director Ryan Fleck told journalists that his approach was to keep everything loose, let the actors move wherever they needed to go. Trust Gosling's instincts. Gosling's instincts produced one of the most honest performances of that decade. Now, 4 years later, something happened that I think gets undersold when people talk about Gosling. Blue Valentine is a 2010 film directed by Derek Cianfrance about a marriage falling apart. On paper, it sounds straightforward. In practice, it almost broke Ryan Gosling. Cianfrance had been trying to make this film for 12 years. He told the cast on day one that he had written 66 drafts, 66, and then he said he didn't want them to follow the script. He said if they only did the script, he would be bored. He wanted them to actually live it. So Gosling and co-star Michelle Williams moved into a rented house outside Scranton, Pennsylvania for a month before they filmed the present-day scenes. They budgeted for groceries together. They did the dishes. They improvised an entire Christmas. They tried to gain weight competitively, which, as relationship exercises go, is extremely advanced. Gosling later described Cianfrance's method like this. He said the director asks you to act as a last resort. If you live as the characters for long enough, you start to feel like you are them. Act as a last resort. After the shoot wrapped, Gosling went to the doctor for a regular physical. The doctor looked at him and wrote him a prescription. Not for medication. The prescription said, "Do a comedy." So, he did the comedy. It was called Crazy Stupid Love. And then, in the exact same year, he made Drive, which is the kind of scheduling that tells you everything you need to know about this man. Drive is a 2011 crime film directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. It is about a stunt driver who moonlights as a getaway driver for criminals. He has no name. He has almost no dialogue. He has a scorpion jacket, a toothpick, and a particular stillness that Refn described as a fairy tale, a silent prince in a city full of monsters. Now, the film had originally been set up as a Fast and Furious type action movie. Different director, Hugh Jackman in the lead, the whole thing. And then Gosling got involved. He chose Refn as director after watching one of his earlier films and noticing something specific in how the audience reacted to a very violent scene, a discomfort with their own enjoyment, an uncertainty about whether they were supposed to laugh or be disturbed, a tone that refused to resolve itself into something safe. That was exactly the energy Gosling wanted. And then he did something that almost no actor with his level of heat in 2011 would have done. He asked Refn if they could remove the dialogue. Not some of it. Most of it. He told Empire that after Blue Valentine, which demanded he be emotionally articulate for months, the silence was a relief. All he had to do was drive. Refn called their first meeting a blind date and described their creative process as a mental fuck in a moving car, which is one of the most accurate descriptions of artistic collaboration I've ever heard. What Gosling builds out of almost no words is genuinely remarkable. The driver says around 900 words across the entire film. He communicates menace, tenderness, love, and controlled violence almost entirely through stillness. He holds his face very still. He moves like a man who has already calculated what happens next. He looks at Carey Mulligan's character in a way that is unmistakably love and never once says so. There's a scene in an elevator where he kisses her and then, in the same breath, stomps a hitman to death in front of her. Both things happen within seconds, and what Gosling plays in the fraction of a moment between them, the absolute precision of a man holding two completely opposite truths at the same time, is the kind of thing that gets described as a great performance, and then somehow not nominated for anything significant. Refn won the Best Director prize at Cannes for this film. Gosling, who hired him, stripped the dialogue, and rebuilt a Junkyard Malibu by hand for the role, was not nominated for anything major. We'll be coming back to that pattern. Okay, so after Drive, what do? You have one of the coolest performances of the decade. Minimal, controlled, mythic. Every studio in Hollywood would love to give you another version of that role. It's the obvious move. Gosling made The Nice Guys. The Nice Guys is a 2016 Shane Black comedy set in 1970s Los Angeles. It is one of the funniest films of the last 10 years. It made almost no money. And Gosling plays Holland March, a drunk, incompetent private detective who is genuinely not very good at detecting. He screams. He falls. He does the kind of physical comedy that requires you to fully abandon every instinct toward dignity, which is a specific kind of courage that is much harder than it looks. There is a scene where March falls off a balcony, crashes through a retaining wall, and ends up lying in a garden while a gunman stands over him. Gosling plays the entire fall and recovery in one unbroken physical sequence, and what he communicates in those 45 seconds, the clumsiness, the terror, the desperate attempt to look like he still has things under control, and then immediately giving up on that, is more character information than most films give you in an entire first act. Shane Black told journalists during the press tour that Gosling's physical comedy instincts surprised him. That's the diplomatic version of saying he had no idea the guy from Drive could do this. The film has a cult following now that grows every year. People who saw it in 2016 have been trying to get everyone else to watch it for nearly a decade. The fact that it didn't make money is one of those cinema injustices that the internet has correctly refused to let go of. But here's the thing. In the same year as The Nice Guys, Gosling also made La La Land. La La Land is Damien Chazelle's 2016 musical about an aspiring actress and a jazz musician who fall in love in Los Angeles, and then slowly, painfully choose their careers over each other. It won 6 Oscars, and it required Gosling to learn jazz piano well enough that the close-up shots of his hands playing are actually his hands playing, no hand double, no cutaway. Chazelle told interviewers that Gosling practiced piano every day for approximately 3 months before filming began. The result is that when Sebastian sits down at an upright piano in a restaurant and gets fired for playing jazz instead of Christmas standards, those are Ryan Gosling's actual hands playing actual jazz, having started from zero. What Gosling does with Sebastian that is easy to miss, because the music is so beautiful that you can get carried away, is that he plays a man who is certain about one thing and uncertain about everything else. And the certainty is not Mia. The certainty is jazz. He loves her completely. But when he plays, he isn't in love. He's convinced. Those are different kinds of belief, and Gosling keeps them separate throughout the whole film. The ending of La La Land is one of the great emotional sequences in recent cinema, a 5-minute fantasy of what might have been, played in perfect detail. And in the last beat, when the fantasy dissolves and Sebastian and Mia are just 2 people in a jazz club who made their choices and are at peace with it, and also a little devastated, what Gosling does with his face in that final moment is the entire film compressed into 2 seconds. He smiles, and the smile contains everything. I'm still not completely over it, for the record. Now, I want to take a quick detour, because there are 2 roles in Gosling's career that I think are criminally under-talked about. The first is Lars and the Real Girl, from 2007. He plays a profoundly isolated small-town man who orders a life-size doll online, names her Bianca, and introduces her to his community as his girlfriend. The entire town plays along out of love for this lonely, clearly struggling man, and what Gosling does with Lars is one of the most tender performances in his entire filmography. He plays a man who has genuinely organized his inner life around this object as a way to survive, and there is zero mockery in it. 0. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars and said Gosling never once lets you doubt that Lars's feelings are real. The second is The Place Beyond the Pines from 2012. Gosling plays a stunt motorcycle rider who robs banks to provide for a child he didn't know he had. He is only in the film for maybe 45 minutes. The next 90 minutes are entirely about the wreckage he leaves behind, and yet you feel him in every scene he's not in, because what he built in those 45 minutes is so physically and emotionally specific that his absence becomes a presence. That is not something a screenplay gives you. That is something an actor builds and leaves behind for everyone else to live inside. And then came Barbie. Greta Gerwig had never met Ryan Gosling. She told Rolling Stone that from the moment she started writing Barbie, she knew the film was for Margot Robbie and for Ryan Gosling. She had never spoken to him. She just was sure. Gosling almost said no. He didn't know if it was right for him. The logistics felt uncomfortable. And then he walked into his backyard and found his daughter's Ken doll lying face down in the mud next to a squished lemon. He texted Gerwig a photo of it and wrote, "I shall be your Ken, for this story must be told." When he came back to do ADR in post-production and watched his own footage for the first time, Gerwig says he had the expression of a man who couldn't quite believe he had done that. She described his performance in the final Ken and Barbie scene as the most wonderful acting, outrageous commitment, and pathos within the matrix of anarchic comedy she had ever seen. Anarchic comedy with pathos. Not words you would have predicted for the man from Drive. Here's what makes the Ken performance special as a piece of craft. Gosling didn't play Ken as a joke. He didn't play the role with a wink. That kind of, I know this is ridiculous, and I know energy. He played Ken the same way he played Dan Dunn's addiction and Sebastian's relationship with jazz, with complete sincerity. Ken genuinely believes he personally discovered patriarchy and cannot wait to explain it to everyone, and because Gosling plays that belief as real, the character becomes funny and sad and somehow kind of moving all at the same time. Mark Ronson, who wrote I'm Just Ken, put it simply. He said the key to Gosling's performance is that he never does it just for the laugh. He takes it seriously as an actor. If it's funny because of the sincerity, not despite it. The Oscar nomination was for Best Supporting Actor. And when Gerwig and Robbie were not nominated for Best Director and Best Actress, which was its own whole thing, Gosling put out a statement. He thanked the Academy, and then he said, "But there is no Ken without Barbie, and there is no Barbie movie without Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie," a nominated actor using his nominations press moment to publicly advocate for the people who didn't get one, from the man who literally played a himbo. And then, earlier this year, Project Hail Mary happened. The film opened on March 20th, 2026. Directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, the people behind 21 Jump Street and the Lego Movie. It's based on Andy Weir's novel about a junior high science teacher named Rylan Grace, who wakes up alone on a spaceship with no memory of who he is or why he's there. His memory slowly returns. The situation becomes clear. He's been sent on a one-way mission 12 light-years away to figure out why the sun is dying. And the only other living thing he encounters is a spider-shaped alien named Rocky, who is dealing with the exact same problem from the other direction. The film runs 2 hours and 36 minutes. Gosling is in almost every frame. It opened to $140.9 million worldwide, the biggest opening weekend for a non-franchise film in Amazon MGM history. Critics called it the first great blockbuster of 2026, and almost every review noted the same thing. This film rests entirely on a single performance, for 2.5 hours, of a man, mostly alone, talking to himself, and then talking to a CGI alien. He has to build a communication system just to understand. Think about what that actually requires. There's no ensemble to hide behind, no co-star chemistry to carry a weak scene, no action sequence that gives you a break from the performance. Every quiet moment, every breakdown, every scientific discovery that has to land as both intellectually credible and emotionally real, all of it is Gosling alone. He told Variety at Comic-Con 2025 that he connected immediately to Rylan's reluctance, that here was an ordinary person dropped into an impossible situation, someone who had given up on himself on Earth and is suddenly the only person who can fix everything. He said Ryland reacts the way a lot of us might actually react, which I'm in with confusion, panic, and the occasional remarkable breakthrough, and that's exactly what makes it work. Gosling doesn't play Ryland as a hero. He plays him as a junior high teacher who keeps discovering, somewhat inconveniently, that he's the only person capable of solving this particular problem. So let's look at all of this together for a second. The teacher who is extraordinary at his job and destroying himself at home. The husband who runs out of things to try. The silent driver who builds a life around never needing anything, and then meets someone he needs. The drunk detective who falls off balconies with inexplicable dignity. The jazz pianist who chooses music over love and has to figure out how to live inside that choice. The plastic boyfriend who has a complete identity crisis and makes you feel it. And now the junior high science teacher who saves the solar system while panicking at an appropriate volume. That's not range for the sake of range. That's not a brand. What connects all of those characters, and I think this is the thing that gets missed, is that every single one of them is a man in genuine crisis about who he is and what his life is for. Every single time, Gosling is asking the same question with different variables. What happens to a person when the thing they built their life around stops working? And every single time he arrives at a completely different answer. He's been doing this since he was 25, since a $700,000 film with a 23-day shoot for pay that wouldn't cover a month's rent in the cities he was filming in. He's been nominated for an Oscar 3 times. He has never won. His fingerprints are on more genre-defining films than almost any actor of his generation. Drive is the DNA of an entire decade of crime cinema. La La Land revived the Hollywood musical. Barbie is already a cultural artifact, and Project Hail Mary is being discussed as a new benchmark for science fiction. The shelf doesn't reflect any of that. But the films do, and I think that's exactly how he would want it. Because he's not building a legacy, he's just trying to find the next thing he hasn't figured out yet. He found a Ken doll face down in the mud and changed his whole mind. That is the kind of actor Ryan Gosling is, and that is why, no matter what he does next, we will probably not see it coming.